In this lesson video, we're going to talk about something called the no shift. So essentially, we've been dealing with no shift questions from the beginning, and they're not as complicated as the shift questions. But it's important to note that, hey, there is something called a no shift, and sometimes there's certain words, such as likewise, just as, ... so, which we'll talk about here at the end of this video, and the not only, but also construction that shows us that we're dealing with a sentence that does not shift. So to give you an example of the difference between a not shift and a shift sentence, let's just take some very basic sentence. You're starting with in public, she was blank, and at home she also kept to herself. So what's important here is the and. There is no contrast. So in public, she's the same way she's at home. She keeps to herself. She is someone who is reserved, not outgoing or brash, which is speaking your mind in an obnoxious way. Tired doesn't quite fit the context. But of course the point here is to contrast this no shift sentence here with one that is a shift. And we see the shift here with the word yet. So now we have a contrast between life of the party and what's the opposite of that? Well, at home she's the opposite of the life of the party. She is reserved. So again, the difference between these two sentences may seem very obvious, and it should be. The whole idea of and versus yet or and versus but. Things get a little complicated when you move away from just simple words like this. So, of course, again, the second one is a shift. The first one is a no shift. What's a no shift look like when it's more complicated? Well, boom, there it is. Just as the cultural context of a novel can inform interpretation, so too. So you'll notice this is a construction that we saw there at a second ago at the very first slide. It said just as ... so too. And the ... means that there are words that are coming in between the just as and the so too. And there, in this case, there's quite a few words. But the point is that this sentence isn't shifting. It's not saying, oh, cultural context of a novel can inform interpretations, but it's not always helpful. That would be a shift. Here it's just saying cultural context of a novel is helpful for interpretations, and it can also is important here with the historical backdrop. So it can inform interpretations and be helpful or inform historical backdrop. And that's the relationship we should note here. So again, this is just as, so to construction, no shift sentence. You want to follow your basic strategies. Notice what word should go in the blank here should be similar to as informed, because we pick up on this phrase. And therefore, the word that works very nicely here is familiarity. Not ignorance, because that would show that suddenly cultural context of a novel isn't important, that there's been a shift. Words like confusion or answer choice C also don't make sense, nor do apathy, which means you don't care at all. It's important to note that, yes, historical backdrop is important, just as cultural context of a novel is. And finally, we can get rid of D, indulgence. And to be indulgent in something is to treat something kind of excessively fondly, especially when that thing doesn't really deserve that, which doesn't make sense whatsoever in this context. So again, familiarity matches up with the first part very well, and just like that, we have arrived at the answer. So again, this is a warm-up, an intro video. Just the main point should be that you walk away knowing the difference between a no shift and a shift, and some of the less common no shift phrases, such as the one we encountered here, and words like likewise.